Hi, welcome back to Coach Clover's Classroom, and today we're going to be talking about the Progressive Era. We kind of already know what this era is about if we just think about what progressive means in modern day, a time where we can change political and social society. Now, we've talked about the massive corruption in Unit 1 in the Gilded Age. With the spoil system of to the victors belong the spoils, we can give jobs out to those who support us. It's part of the corrupt political machines like Boss Man Tweed and Tammany Hall. President Garfield, elected in 81, is going to push to end the spoil system. In the same year that he is elected and assumes office, there's going to be a man by the name of Charles Gontinier who believes that he should be a federal judge because he supported President Garfield. When he does not get that position, Gontinier is going to take his revolver and assassinate the president because he believed that he should have been given that job. Chester Arthur is going to become president after Garfield is going to be assassinated. Not the cat, the president, Garfield, is going to be assassinated, making him the second president killed on the job. So Chester Arthur, the man with two first names, is going to become president, and he's going to pass the Civil Service Act. What the Civil Service Act does is it makes it that if you want to have a job in the state or federal government, you have to take a test to show that you are capable of performing the duties of that job. If you want to be a teacher, you have to take a test and be certified. If you want to be a police officer, you must take a test and be certified. To be a firefighter, you must take a test and be certified. To be president, you do not have to do that. So, we see this divide of those in the United States starting with money. The most reasons and causes of arguments is money. So the U.S. is being backed by gold at this time during the Civil War until the government decides to issue money that isn't backed by any value or possessions other than the fact that we say it has value. This money is valuable because I say it's valuable. And after the Civil War, we start debating on whether to go to gold or to silver. Now, gold is being supported by the bankers in the United States because it makes the dollar worth more. Your dollar is more powerful. Your dollar can buy a certain part of gold. Farmers, miners, and other lower income people at this time are going to push for silver because it makes your dollar have less value, and it's going to help you if you're in debt to have your dollar be worth less in value. So we really see this divide starting between bankers and farmers, which leads us to arm issues and populism. Farmers are going into debt because they are paying too much to grow their crops. They're losing more money by growing crops and selling them than they're making in profit. Here's the dilemma. If farmers can't make a profit, they're not going to grow food. And if farmers don't grow food, there's no food to eat, and people starve. So farmers are going into debt because they can't stop growing food, and they're going to blame banks and railroads for jacking up the prices. We see farmers begin to organize in what is almost a union, which was become the Grange, getting together to form new groups to have bargaining power, to improve technology and advancements, find better ways to farm. The Farmers Alliance, future granddaddy of FFA, founded in Texas, is going to get and say that the farmers of America need help. They need warehouses that farmers can put their crops until it's time to be sold, and that railroads should lower their cost so that they can sell food and make a profit. So the Farmers Alliance is going to turn into the People's Party or the Populist Party. It's not just appealing to farmers, but to miners, industrial workers, factory workers, those who aren't the extremely wealthy at this time. They're going to call for the government to control railroads, telegraphs, the national market. And it gained steam because, as most third parties do, they focused on issues that weren't very popular and mostly ignored. The problem with third parties is that in a traditional two-party system like the United States has, third parties can split the major party. And so you have one party at 49%, you have Party B at 25%, and Party C at 26%. Now, even though Party A at 49% didn't have the majority, they're going to win because it split the other party's votes. So the Populist Party is going to push for 5 big agendas. They're going to push for government ownership of railroads, which won't happen in the 1980s or 90s. It'll happen later, as Amtrak is now a government-run organization. Yes, to ride a passenger train that is owned by the government, that happens. They wanted the rights of workers to form unions, which will vary from state to state. They want lower public financing and rates so that farmers can grow their crops at an increased value. They want the 16th Amendment, which is a graduated income tax. And this is the worst laws of all the laws, in my opinion, as it places no limit on what can be taxed. You can wake up tomorrow and the government will have a mortgage and a loan on your car, your house, your dog, and even the church, because we never set a limit. And number 17, the direct election of senators. So we've had 5 amendments passed since the Civil War. Now we're going to recap all of those just because you may see that on your test and maybe on your star. The 13th, 14th, and 15th can be memorized with this short little phrase: free citizens vote. Say it with me. Free citizens vote. The 13th Amendment frees former slaves. The 14th Amendment gives African Americans and all those born in the United States citizenship. And the 15th Amendment grants people the right to vote based off the color of their skin. It grants specifically men the right to vote. Free citizens vote. Now we have income tax at 16 and election at 17. Free citizens vote, taxes, and senators. We're going to add 2 more before the end of this video. So the Populist Party will join with the Democratic Party and nominate a man named William Jennings Bryan from Nebraska, who's going to push for having the dollar backed by silver. He's going to have a saying of, "You shall not crucify the poor, give them no crown of thorns, and on no cross of gold," saying that the Americans need the dollar to be less in value so it can stretch out a little bit further. And the gold standard was going to be the ruin of the American laborer. And so the Republicans naturally meet this challenge with their own pushing for the gold standard. They nominate William McKinley from Ohio. There you go on the bottom right side. Look at that comb over. The election is going to be called the first, let's put this in quotation, modern election, as it's the first time we spend $15 million trying to make someone president. McKinley is going to win in 1896. My apologies. And become the 25th president. Now, all of this era is the progressive era, and it's really pushing for change in the United States. Progressivism wanting to change the political and social life, correct the abuses, the injustices caused by industrialization and corruption, make it a better and more equal society for all. Now, with the corruption, you may have heard of this term called digging up dirt. Someone digs up dirt on you, that means they're looking for something that you don't want publicly known. They're looking for secrets, something to tarnish your reputation. You may have heard of trucking through the muck, going through the dirt or the mud. We get this term the muckrakers, people who are going to look for issues and the ills in society. Specifically, muckrakers are journalists. We've talked about Jacob Riis and how the other half lives in the Gilded Age. Let's talk about Upton Sinclair, who writes The Jungle. Based on American slaughterhouses and the food industry, he tells of how packing plants would put rotten meat in with fresh meat, rusty metal, and day-old blood and water into a bucket, let it sit overnight, and then package it up and sell it as specials. How they would put out brown gelatin in with rotting and spare meat to packet it into sausage. The idea of someone fell in to a vac and was processed in the meat also comes out in The Jungle. Atrocious things. So his work, The Jungle, is going to lead for the creation of the Pure Food and Drug Act. This is important because it creates the Food and Drug Administration. If you walk into a restaurant or a place that serves food, they're supposed to have a license from the FDA showing that they meet sanitary standards. It's that little white piece of paper that has a red A or a B on it. Other muckrakers like Jacob Riis showing the crowded life in the tenements and how in his book How the Other Half Lives. People are going to subscribe to the social gospel that the Bible teaches charity and justice, and we need to bring back those traditional values. It's not just Jacob Riis and Upton Sinclair leading the fight. We have other progressives. Jane Addams, who creates whole houses, homes for poor immigrants, schools for children, health clinics for women, lawyer's office to help them in abusive marriages and relationships. These whole houses, these refuges for mistreated women, spread like wildfire through the United States as it's addressing an issue that needs to be addressed badly. But it's not just that. It's not just Jane Addams. So also in the progressive era, we have women like Margaret Sanger, who is going to challenge the laws on contraceptives and birth control. Now, you need to understand that for the longest time, people did not have reliable access and effective birth control, which is why women have been kept in domestic issues for most of history to this point in time. Margaret Sanger is going to be arrested with several other doctors helping women grant access to birth control, the IUDs. Some states like New York are going to make these illegal at the time, but it's going to be works like Margaret Sanger and other doctors and activists who are going to push to change these laws to get women the health care they need. Now, with women being taken care of in abusive relationships and getting effective birth control, women and children are also breadwinners for their family. The massive industrialization, though, causes injustices, and part of that we see here at the Triangle Shirt Factory. This building with women working on the 10th and 13th floor, sewing for $3 a week to try and make a living. Managers would lock the doors to prevent people from stealing, and unauthorized bathroom breaks. And when we say lock, we don't mean you turned a tiny key to lock the door. They would put a chain around the doors and a padlock on it to stop people from leaving. Unfortunately, the building caught fire on the second floor, and as the fires climbed, the fire trucks came but weren't able to reach the floors on that the women were on. And so 46 women jumped from the windows and died. 100 more died from the flames inside, and many more died from suffocation of the smoke. But it came as a wake-up call for America that we needed clearly marked exits, acceptable and unblocked exits that were not going to be chained. We needed improved safety conditions. They needed to put guardrails on the Death Star, in other words. There was an issue and they needed to be addressed with safety. Progressives are also going to push politically, changing the landscape with direct primaries where citizens can choose who's going to be president. They can propose laws, they can approve or reject the laws, and they can recall elected officials before their term ends if they're doing a very awful job. We saw this in NBC's hit comedy show Parks and Rec, where they recalled Leslie Knope. All this is efforts for striving for equality. For 30 years, women are pushing for economic independence to be able to provide for themselves and their families. We get the creation of the women's temperance movement, which pushes the issue of prohibition, the banning of alcohol. Now, I said we were going to add 2 more amendments before the day is over. 13th, 14th, and 15th, free citizens vote. The direct election of senators is 17. 16 is the income tax. The 18th Amendment is going to be the banning of alcohol. Here's an easy way to remember this. You cannot legally drink alcohol at the age of 18. You can at the age of 21, which is the amendment that brings it back. There's a fun way to remember it. So, free citizens vote, taxes, direct election of senators, banning of alcohol. The 19th Amendment is giving women the right to vote. And this is the act of suffragettes and them pushing suffrage. Suffrage does not mean the right to suffer. Please do not be that one student who says it is the right to suffer. Activists like Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton have been pushing for women to get the right to vote since 1860s. It only took 40 years. 40 years, far too long. So, women getting the right to vote in the 19th Amendment, we lead us to another issue, and that is the treatment of African Americans at this time. Ida B. Wells, much like Jane Addams, creating daycares and centers to protect Black children while their parents are at work, pushing for anti-lynching efforts, pushing for women's right to vote. Ida B. Wells is much like Margaret Sanger and Jane Addams at that time. We see segregation in the United States, Plessy versus Ferguson, the landmark Supreme Court case that ruled that it was separate but equal facilities. John Harlan was the only justice who ruled against it. And this put places like Texas and California in a bind because there's a large Hispanic population in these states. Hispanics were considered white but not given the full rights of citizenship. They couldn't use the facilities that African Americans used. They were in an awkward limbo stage. Furthermore, in places like California, which have a large Asian population, immigrants found themselves not considered white nor black, had no legal rights, and were continued to be mistreated. This leads us to two famous African American progressives, Booker T. Washington and W.E. Du Bois. So Booker T. Washington is going to greatly strengthen the Tuskegee Institute of Technology. He's going to push for African Americans to have an industrial education. There should be two separate societies of whites and blacks, and that African Americans were going to get equality through economic independence, that they were going to prove that African American craftsmanship and work was competitive and equal with that of white Americans. On the other hand, his counterpart, W.E.B. Du Bois, said that African Americans needed political equality first. He's one of the few college-educated black men at this time. He creates the NAACP, which helped push the Reconstruction Amendments through. And so we get this parallel of Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Booker T being very much like Malcolm X, and that political equality is going to come through segregation, separate communities, and equal craftsmanship. And W.E.B. Du Bois, like Martin Luther King, who says that it's going to come through political equality. Which leads us to our very last section, and that is progressive presidents. Theodore Roosevelt in 1901 is going to become president after McKinley assassinated, making McKinley our third president to be assassinated on the role, on the job. Teddy Roosevelt becomes president. He believes that America has good and bad sides of our economy and our economics, the square deal. We must improve the good but limit the bad. And one of his first ways that he targets this is attacking J.P. Morgan's railroad company under the Sherman Antitrust Act. Remember, we said that if a monopoly was too big, that we were going to break it up. He's the first president to enforce it. And he does it successfully. The Supreme Court breaks up J.P. Morgan's trust. He's going to push with Upton Sinclair that we need to pass the Food and Drug Act, create the FDA. He calls for income taxes and supports the 16th Amendment and supports the ICC. He's a very progressive president. Lots of changes occur during Theodore Roosevelt's reign. He also is an active outdoorist. Dedicated to the outdoors, Teddy Roosevelt creates the National Forest Service, later to become the National Park Service, creates Yellowstone, and sets millions of acres aside to preserve the wildlife and resources for future Americans. His predecessors, Howard Taft, on the other hand, defeats William Jennings Bryan for the third time as he runs for office. Taft continues to push through Roosevelt's economic policies, but does not push through the environmental goals that Teddy Roosevelt had wanted. And so Roosevelt and Taft have a falling out. Roosevelt creates the Bull Moose Party and splits the vote of the Republican Party at the time, leaving Woodrow Wilson as our final progressive president. Wilson wants to free the government from business, still supporting the idea that we shouldn't have monopolies, creates taxes, creates the Federal Reserve System, the banking system of America. If you look on a dollar bill and they have the barcode, the Federal Reserve System tells you where that dollar bill is from. He creates the FTC to regulate prices and practices. And ultimately is going to be the end of the progressive era. I know we've covered a lot today. Thank you for sticking through to the end. Next time we will be talking about the U.S. role in imperialism, talking about the Spanish-American War, among many others. But until then, please know that I love you, I'm proud of you, and take care. Don't do nothing illegal.